Jack Callahan took another swig of whiskey and stared out at the Montana night. The neon glow of the Rusty Stag, the town's only decent bar, flickered behind him. His knuckles ached from the fight he barely remembered starting, and his head swam in a haze of alcohol and regret. He staggered down the dirt road leading to his cabin, the cold night air doing little to clear his mind. The bottle in his hand was half empty, and he planned to finish it before he passed out. That was his routine. Drink until the past blurred into nothingness. The past. That was the real poison. He could still see their faces, his wife, Emily, and his little girl, Sophie, smiling, laughing, then gone, taken in an accident that left Jack breathing but dead inside. He had tried to keep going, tried to be the man he used to be, a Marine, a protector, but in the end, the bottle was easier. No responsibilities, no expectations. Just the slow, numbing descent into nothing. Tonight, like every night, he welcomed it. Jack made it as far as the tree line before the sky split open. A brilliant streak of fire tore through the heavens, a burning object slicing across the stars. It moved too fast for a plane, too erratic for a meteor. For a brief moment, he sobered up. Then came the impact. A distant boom shook the trees, followed by the distant glow of flames rising from the deep woods. Jack stood frozen, heart pounding. The rational part of his mind told him to turn around, to pretend he hadn't seen anything. But that old instinct, the one the Marine Corps had drilled into him, kicked in. Someone might be hurt. Cursing under his breath, he turned and walked toward the crash site. The woods were dark and quiet, the distant sound of embers crackling guiding him forward. As he approached the clearing, the smell of burning metal filled his nose. The wreck wasn't a plane. It wasn't anything human. A sleek, metallic pod lay half-buried in the dirt, its surface still glowing with residual heat. It was smooth, almost organic-looking, with strange patterns glowing faintly along its hull. Small fires burned around it, casting eerie shadows through the trees. Jack's breath hitched. This wasn't normal. Then he heard the sound. A weak, ragged breath. Someone was inside. Against every instinct telling him to walk away, he stepped closer and put a hand against the pod's side. The metal was warm, pulsing beneath his palm like something alive. A jagged crack ran along its side, a small opening just wide enough to see inside. And then he saw her. A girl. No, not a girl, not exactly. She was humanoid, but not human. Her skin was pale, almost iridescent, reflecting the firelight in shifting hues. Bioluminescent markings ran along her arms and neck, faint and flickering like dying embers. Her golden eyes, large and alien, locked onto his, full of pain and fear. She was hurt. Jack's first instinct was to step back, to pretend this wasn't happening. He didn't do responsibility. He didn't do saving people. He couldn't even save himself. But then she reached out. Her fingers trembled, her breath shallow. She was dying. Something inside Jack, something long buried, clawed its way to the surface. He clenched his jaw, muttered a curse, and shoved his hands into the crack of the pod. With a grunt, he pried it open. The girl gasped as the cold air hit her. She tried to sit up, but her strength failed her. Jack didn't think. He just acted. He scooped her into his arms, surprised at how light she was. She tensed, but then her body went limp, too weak to resist. "Damn it," he muttered. "Guess you're coming with me." He turned, carrying her away from the wreckage. And that's when he heard the howling. Low, guttural, wrong. Jack froze. Something else had crashed with her, and it wasn't friendly. The trees rustled in the distance, something moving through the underbrush, something fast. Jack didn't wait to find out what it was. He adjusted his grip on the girl and ran. Jack kicked the cabin door shut behind him and bolted it, breathing hard. The alien girl in his arms was barely conscious, her golden eyes flickering open for a second before closing again. She was dying. He carried her to the couch, laying her down carefully. Up close, she looked even more fragile. Her skin had a faint glow, like moonlight on water, but it was flickering, weakening. Her breathing was shallow, her body trembling. Jack ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process what was happening. He had seen combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, had lost everything back home, had drowned himself in alcohol for years. But this? A crashed alien in his cabin? A low growl echoed outside. His blood turned to ice. The thing from the woods had followed them. Jack grabbed his shotgun from the rack near the fireplace. He hadn't fired it in months, but his hands still knew the weight of it, the familiarity of steel and wood. Muscle memory was a hell of a thing. He moved to the window and peered through the cracked blinds. The moonlight barely touched the tree-line, but something was out there, shifting between the shadows. It moved too fast, too smoothly, like it wasn't bound by normal muscle or bone. A hunter. Jack's grip tightened on the shotgun. If it came for the girl, it would have to go through him. A weak noise behind him made him turn. The alien girl was awake. She tried to sit up but gasped in pain, her hands clutching at her side. Jack saw dark, iridescent blood seeping through a tear in her strange, form-fitting suit. Jack grabbed a rag from the kitchen and crouched beside her. "Hey, stay still," he said gruffly. "You're hurt." Her golden eyes locked onto his. Her lips moved, but her voice was barely a whisper. "You help." Jack exhaled. She spoke English? Well, sort of. Her accent was strange, like she was shaping the words without quite knowing how they fit together. "Yeah," he muttered, pressing the rag against the wound. "Lucky for you. I'm too damn stubborn to let someone die on my couch." She flinched at the pressure, but didn't pull away. For a moment, silence stretched between them, her staring at him, Jack trying to ignore how surreal this all was. Finally, she swallowed and spoke again. "New York. Nisha." Jack frowned. "That your name?" She nodded weakly. "All right, Nisha. I'm Jack." He finished tying the makeshift bandage and sat back. "Mind telling me what the hell is out there in my woods?" At first, she didn't respond. Then, slowly, she lifted a shaking hand. Jack realized she wasn't pointing at anything. She was showing him something. A vision hit him like a hammer. Flashes of images, not memories of his own, but hers. A sleek, silver ship gliding through the void. A sudden explosion. Fire, screams, panic. Dark figures, monstrous and sleek, ripping through her people. A desperate escape pod launch. Then, the final image, the hunters. They weren't human. Tall, skeletal creatures with elongated limbs and razor-sharp appendages. No eyes. Just smooth, predatory faces. They were reapers, she whispered in his mind. Destroyers of civilizations. Jack staggered back, shaking his head as the vision faded. Nisha was watching him carefully. "Now you know." Jack exhaled. "Yeah," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "I wish I didn't." Another growl outside snapped him back to the present. Nisha's eyes widened in fear. "Reaper." Jack cursed under his breath and stood, pumping the shotgun. No way was he letting some alien monster tear through his cabin. "Stay down," he ordered. He moved to the door, bracing himself. The growling grew louder. Then silence. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. That was worse. A single claw scraped against the wood of the cabin. Then, in an instant, something hit the door like a battering ram. Jack fired. The blast tore through the wooden planks, but the thing outside didn't scream. It only hissed, low and hungry. Then, glass shattered. Jack turned just in time to see black, spindly limbs pulling through the broken window. Nisha cried out. Jack didn't hesitate. He turned, aimed, and fired point blank. The thing screeched as the buckshot tore into its chest, its body thrashing. But it didn't die. Jack cursed. Figures. The Reaper lunged. Jack barely had time to react. It was faster than anything he'd ever seen. The shotgun was knocked from his hands as claws slashed toward his face. A blue flash. The Reaper howled in pain, stumbling back. Jack saw Nisha, hand outstretched, her markings glowing bright. Energy crackled between her fingers, fading quickly, but the damage was done. The creature was dazed. Jack didn't waste the opening. He grabbed a hunting knife from his belt and drove it straight into the thing's throat. The Reaper spasmed, choking on its own thick, black ichor. It collapsed, its body twitching before going still. Jack stood there, breathing hard. The cabin was silent again. He turned to Nisha, who was trembling, barely staying conscious. Her bioluminescent glow was flickering. Whatever she had done had drained her. Jack exhaled and sat beside her, rubbing a hand down his face. "Well," he muttered, glancing at the dead Reaper. "Looks like we got a problem." Nisha, barely awake, whispered, "More will come." Jack sighed. Of course they would. He reached for his flask out of habit, but stopped. Instead, he grabbed a shotgun and checked the shells. If more were coming, he'd be ready. The old truck rumbled down the highway, its engine sputtering like it might give out at any second. Jack gripped the wheel, eyes scanning the dark road ahead. Beside him, Nisha sat curled up in the passenger seat, wrapped in an old army jacket. She was still weak, but at least she was alive. Jack exhaled and tightened his grip. One problem at a time. 2 days ago, his life had been simple. Miserable, but simple. Now, he was on the run with an alien fugitive, heading toward an old military bunker in Wyoming where, if his contacts weren't full of shit, they might find help. Behind them, the Reapers weren't far. He'd seen their ships in the sky last night, black silhouettes against the stars, watching. "Hunting, you okay?" he muttered, glancing at Nisha. She didn't answer right away. Her golden eyes were fixed on the window, watching the empty plains roll by. "Your world, beautiful," she said softly. Jack snorted. "Yeah, real paradise." Nisha turned to look at him. "You do not see it." Jack didn't answer. How could he explain? How could he tell her that all he saw when he looked at the world was what he'd lost? The wife and daughter he'd buried. The life he'd let rot in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. Instead, he just said, "Not really." Nisha studied him for a long moment. "You fight, but you do not believe in what you fight for." Jack clenched his jaw. "I fight to keep us alive." Nisha's gaze didn't waver. "That is not enough." Jack exhaled through his nose and turned up the radio. The static-filled hum of an old Johnny Cash song filled the truck. That was the end of that conversation. By morning, they stopped at an old gas station on the outskirts of a dying town. Jack pulled his cap lower and kept his head down as he filled the tank, watching for anything that looked out of place. Inside the truck, Nisha stared at the people, an old couple walking out with coffee, a kid riding a beat-up bicycle, a tired-looking cashier behind the counter. "They do not know," she murmured as Jack climbed back in. "Know what?" Nisha looked at him, her expression unreadable. "That the sky is watching." Jack didn't answer. He just put the truck in gear and drove. That night, they made camp in an abandoned farmhouse off the highway. Jack had a fire going in the rusted-out fireplace while Nisha sat across from him, watching. "You said your people faced extinction once," he said finally, breaking the silence. Nisha nodded. "Long ago. The Reapers came. We were weak." She looked down, hands resting on the old army jacket he'd given her. "We ran, hid, but we did not die." Jack watched the fire crackle. "Ow!" Nisha hesitated, then met his gaze. "We learned that survival is not just staying alive. It is finding something worth living for." Jack stared at the flames. The words hit him harder than they should have. He used to have something worth living for, and when he lost it, he stopped trying. For years, he had convinced himself that nothing mattered, that drinking himself to death in a nowhere town was the only path left. But then Nisha had crashed into his life, literally. And now, for the first time in years, he was fighting for something. Not revenge, not regret, just survival. Jack exhaled. "Hell of a thing," he muttered. Nisha tilted her head. "What is?" He looked at her, then shook his head. "Nothing. Get some rest. We leave at dawn." The attack came just before sunrise. Jack woke to the sound of metal slicing through wood. "Move!" he barked, rolling out of his sleeping bag just as the wall exploded inward. Nisha yelped, scrambling back as a Reaper drone lunged into the room. It wasn't one of the tall ones. This was something smaller, faster, built for the hunt. Jack grabbed his shotgun and fired. The blast caught the thing in the chest, sending it skidding back, but it wasn't dead. Not yet. Nisha lifted a shaking hand, her markings flaring with blue light. A pulse of energy struck the drone, shorting out its sensors. Jack didn't hesitate. He charged forward and drove his knife into its head. The drone convulsed once, then went still. Jack panted, gripping his knife. "They found us." Nisha clutched his arm, her breath ragged. They're calling more. Jack's stomach tightened. They had to go. Now. He grabbed their gear and hauled Nisha to her feet. Come on, kid. Time to move. Outside, the first hints of dawn were creeping over the horizon. The truck was parked 50 yards away. If they could make it, a distant roar cut through the air. Jack turned, heart pounding. On the hilltop, silhouetted against the rising sun, stood 3 reapers. Watching. Waiting. Jack swallowed hard. They weren't just hunting anymore. They were closing in. Jack, Nisha whispered. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and pumped his shotgun. Get in the truck, he said. Then, as the reapers began to descend, he ran toward them. Jack fired as he ran. The first reaper staggered as buckshot tore through its chest, but it didn't go down. They were built for war, not for dying easily. Behind him, Nisha scrambled into the truck. Jack heard the door slam and the engine roar to life. Good girl. The second reaper lunged. Jack barely dodged in time, rolling in the dirt as black claws slashed through the air where his head had been. He came up on one knee and fired again, aiming for the joint in its elongated limbs. This time, it screamed. The third one was faster. It came at him like a nightmare, silent, efficient, deadly. Jack had just enough time to bring up his shotgun before it slammed into him. They crashed to the ground. Claws raked across his side. Pain flared hot and deep, but Jack didn't let go of the shotgun. With a desperate grunt, he shoved the barrel under its jaw and pulled the trigger. The reaper convulsed. Its body jerked violently before collapsing on top of him, twitching in its death throes. Jack shoved it off and staggered to his feet. The first reaper was still up, its wounds already sealing. Then, headlights blazed through the dark. The truck barreled toward them. Jack barely had time to throw himself to the side before Nisha rammed the reaper at full speed. The impact sent it flying. Jack didn't wait to see if it got up. He sprinted for the passenger side, threw the door open, and hauled himself inside. Drive, he barked. Nisha didn't hesitate. She floored it, tires spitting dirt as the truck roared onto the road. Jack twisted in his seat, watching as the remaining reapers faded into the distance. For now, at least, they were clear. He slumped back, breathing hard. His side was bleeding, his ribs ached, and his hands were shaking from the adrenaline. Nisha glanced at him. You are hurt. Jack snorted. Yeah, well, ain't the first time. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You did not run. Jack turned to look at her. She was gripping the wheel tight, her expression unreadable. You ran toward them, she said, to protect me. Jack exhaled. He hadn't thought about it. He just acted. Years of instinct, of training, of being a protector, even when he swore he wasn't one anymore. He didn't know what to say to that. So he just muttered, Yeah, well, couldn't let you have all the fun. Nisha didn't laugh. She just kept watching him, something soft, uncertain in her golden eyes. You think you are broken, she said, but you are not. Jack stiffened. What the hell do you know? Nisha didn't flinch. I know a man who has lost everything, but still chooses to fight. Jack looked away. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. Yeah, he muttered. Guess I do. They drove through the night. By dawn, they reached the outskirts of an abandoned military bunker, an old Cold War relic Jack's contact had told him about years ago. Jack parked the truck near the entrance and killed the engine. This place should be safe, he said, grabbing his shotgun. At least for a little while. Nisha followed him inside. The bunker smelled of dust and rust, but it was solid, thick steel doors, reinforced walls. If the Reapers found them here, at least they'd have a fighting chance. Jack started checking supplies, making sure they had enough ammo and food to last a few days. Nisha, meanwhile, sat on an old metal bench, staring at her hands. Finally, she said, I must leave soon. Jack paused. What? She looked up, her bioluminescent markings flickering faintly. I cannot stay. If I do, the Reapers will never stop hunting. Jack's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. She wasn't some lost kid. She was the last survivor of her people, and the Reapers weren't just here for revenge. They were here to finish the job. If she stayed, they'd tear Earth apart to find her. Jack exhaled. You got a plan? Nisha. Yes. If you adopt me, my power will be divided between us, and I will disappear from their radar." Nisha fell silent. Jack kept looking at her with wide eyes and started remembering his bottle. Nisha waved her hand in the air and offered a rare whiskey. Jack was confused. "How did you know that I needed this?" "Nisha, if you agree to marry me, your life will change." Jack hugged her in his arms and started remembering his wife. Nisha kissed her, and the information became clear. The clouds of danger fell.